Hello, welcome to episode 2 of my YouTube channel entitled Relational Dharma. I'm Robin Stutzman, senior mindfulness teacher, author, and psychotherapist. In this episode, I'll say a bit more about the human stress reaction and how it plays out in heated interactions. I'll also describe 3 main types of mindfulness practices, which are important parts of our journey toward more easeful interactions. By the way, the acronym MORS, M-O-R-S, which you'll hear me using down the road, stands for Moments of Interpersonal Reactivity. There are 3 kinds of mindfulness practices that are important to learn on this journey. They are mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feeling tone, a lot more on this later, and mindfulness of thoughts and emotions. The practices that focus on the body help us to become more intimately aware of all the signs of stress in the body, which aid us in relaxing the body before the stress response increases. Also, by focusing on the body, we have an anchor, the body, which can help us not get carried away by difficult thoughts and emotions during the interaction. I'll provide some guided body-centered practices as well as dive more deeply into these practices in later episodes. The second way that we can direct our awareness when meditating is to observe whether our thoughts, physical sensations, emotions, or even our senses are pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. For example, we might label the prick of a thorn, the sound of a lawnmower, or an angry thought as unpleasant. Or we might then label the sound of a bird singing, the taste of ice cream, or a happy daydream as pleasant. I'll devote several episodes to this practice later as it's a critical one. This simple practice has the possibility of profoundly transforming the patterns of interpersonal reactivity that we struggle with. I'll provide guided versions of this practice as well on this channel. The third mode of practice that we learn, which helps us in our moments of reactivity or MORS, is mindfulness of thoughts and emotions. Learning to just sit and watch thoughts and emotions come and go without attaching to them, going down the rabbit hole with them, or pushing them away is of indispensable help in reducing our stress level in troublesome interactions. I'll provide some guided recordings of these practices as well later on in the channel. It turns out that mindfulness practices go a long way towards taming the stress reactivity that causes so much struggle and difficulty in challenging interactions. Studies show that mindfulness practices decrease the reactivity in the amygdala. That's the part of the brain that triggers the production of stress hormones, so that over time, folks who practice mindfulness just don't feel as stressed by things the way that they used to. And it's so important to become less reactive during challenging interactions because, remember from the previous episode, the other person's brain will pick up on your reactivity and they'll become more reactive themselves, thus triggering that dance of co-reactivity I mentioned in the previous episode. Mindfulness also increases the volume of certain regions of the brain, such as the prefrontal cortex, which, among other things, helps us to pause before we react. And that's a great thing, right? So there's a ton of research on mindfulness and its benefits to the brain, and these studies are in their infancy, but we're now seeing from a brain biology perspective why people have reported great benefits from mindfulness practices for a couple of thousand years. In my next episode, I'll talk a bit about the Dharma principles, the wisdom part of Buddhist psychology that I mentioned in episode 1. Until then, be safe, happy, and peaceful.